Hi there, welcome to week 4 of the Extreme Self-Awareness Bootcamp. We are in the final stretch. Thank you for sticking with me. Today's focus is going to be character strengths. We will talk about your signature strengths and how they play a critical role in unlocking your potential. Character strengths are an important part of self-awareness because they help you transcend personality. They help you to be true to your principles, and they play a critical role, especially when facing discomfort and adversity. Now, the character strengths we are going to discuss in our assessment and in this week come from the positive psychology movement. So, psychology historically was all about taking somebody who's feeling like a -10 and make them feel like a 0, right? Just get them back to normal. But then Martin Seligman, who started the positive psychology out of the University of Pennsylvania, he started saying, hey, what about the people who are feeling good and want to really go after their full potential? So he started the positive psychology movement to help people who are feeling like a 1 or a 10 and help them get to feel like 100 or 1,000, to really go into self-actualization, to really go after achieving your full potential. Now, when they started the movement for positive psychology, one of the core things they realized was character strengths are a foundational component of going after your full potential, right? So they went on a very big research project and they did it in a very unique way because they went and studied all the ancient wisdom, starting from the early days of civilization, all the different ancient wisdoms from the various different traditions, and they distilled some common elements that came from there in terms of what were the character strengths that each of those different ancient traditions talked about, and that is what they called virtues, right? Now, they took all those virtues and then they compared it with modern science, right? Of course, psychology as a modern science has developed in the last 150 years. So they studied now the virtues from a modern science perspective and compared that with the ancient wisdom traditions, the virtues from the ancient wisdom traditions. Now, to their surprise, what they found was that there is commonality between modern science and ancient wisdom. So if you take Aristotle, for example, he talked about the concept of eudaimonology, which is study of a good soul. And he said, to be a good soul, you need to live with virtue, live with arete, right? Now, all the modern science research that Martin Seligman and team did also came to the same conclusion. And they said the study of a good soul, which is like going after self-actualization, they called it flourishing in the modern world. Now, for you to be flourishing in your life, they said you also need to be living a life of virtue, and they created this assessment called virtues in action, right? So that is the test that you have all taken, and that is where they actually they give you a sense of what are your signature strengths, and they rate you across all these different virtues that are part of this assessment. Now, they took all the virtues and they found that these virtues typically fall under one of these 6 categories, right? They are transcendence, wisdom, courage, humanity, justice, and temperance, right? Especially people in the Western world might be very familiar with some of these virtue categories. However, they said, how do we make this relevant to the modern workplace, right? Especially if you're talking about leadership and talking about how to be effective in an organization. So what they did was they took those 6 different categories and they broke out the virtues into 24 different virtues, right? So now it has things like leadership, it has things like kindness, it has things like love of learning, right? So those are relevant to the modern workplace. So they broke down the virtues into these 24 different virtues. All of us have these 24 different virtues, so you don't have to worry about do I have all of them or am I missing any of the virtues. We all have all of them. However, they are mapped into an order of priority or precedence in terms of which ones show up the most for us, or which ones are what they call signature strengths. Now, before we go and look at the signature strengths, I want to call your attention to 2 particular virtues that are very critical. One of them is gratitude. Now, gratitude has been talked about a lot in terms of the power of gratitude. I mean, having a gratitude journal, especially when we are facing adversity, they say if you can go into a sense of look at things from a place of gratitude, then you're able to put things into perspective. So gratitude has a very powerful role to play in our lives, and I think it's important to embrace gratitude, especially when we're going through hardship. But the other one that I want to really get your attention to is called zest. Now, from the research, what they found is that zest, which is a love for life, having a sense of hope and having a sense of positivity towards your future, has a direct correlation to your longevity. Longevity meaning how long you will live, right? So having a good zest score, having it either in your top 5 or at least in your middle bucket is important, because that has a direct correlation to how long you will live in this world. So just take a look at where zest falls into that bucket for you. And if it is in the bottom 5, don't worry about it. We'll talk about it during the session. Now, let us talk about signature strengths. Your top 5 strengths are called signature strengths, and there is a reason for that. What they found through the research was that they are called signature strengths because of these 3 E's, right? The first E is essential, which means that this virtue feels like essential to who you are as a person, almost like your core values, right? Because without this virtue, you feel incomplete. No, it could be courage, it could be curiosity, it could be humor for some people, right? Because for them, humor is such a part and parcel of who they are and how they show up. Not being funny is like, then they are like, I'm not even being myself, right? So that's a great example of feeling like this virtue is essential to who I am. The second one is effortless, which means that when you use this virtue, it comes naturally to you. It is not something that you have to remember and actually force yourself to do. It is something that comes naturally to you. It comes effortlessly to you. It feels like, yeah, this is something I do all the time, right? So that is the second piece of a signature strength. The third element is energizing, which means that when you use this virtue, you feel energized. You feel a sense of upliftment. It makes you feel happy, right? So that is the third component of signature strength, about feeling energized when you use this virtue. So look at your top 5 virtues, and hopefully there are at least 1 or 2 or 3 virtues that actually satisfy these 3 conditions of essential, effortless, and energizing. Now, there may be 1 or 2 where you're like, oh, I'm not sure how that came up in my top 5, or I'm not sure that is a signature strength. That's okay. We can talk about it. You may be forced to use that particular skill under the current circumstances for some reason, but that is not something that you really see as a signature strength. But if it is something that you have been recently using a lot, it will still show up in your top 5, right? So that's basically the essence of the signature strengths. So we will, of course, unpack all of this. We will look at each of your reports, look at your top 5s, and have a discussion on how you feel about your signature strengths in the live session. So see you there.